all of my internet friends. My name's Joel. It's the second Sunday of Lent. You're a week in, maybe a little bit longer than a week in to Lent. Before we get started, I need to know, what are you giving up for Lent? What are you fasting from Lent? Drop that in the comments below. I want to see it. I'll respond to a few over the next week. What are you giving up for Lent this year? Tell me in the comments below this video. Let's dive right in. I was thinking and laughing as I read through the gospel this week about all of the times I have fallen asleep in class or in a lecture or in church, because that's what happens to the disciples. And it's this really little line that's easy to miss. But during the transfiguration, the disciples are asleep when Jesus is transfigured. So there's a kind of a fun parallel here, right, with the Garden of Gethsemane, because the disciples fall asleep when Jesus is praying there too, the night before his crucifixion. But I think about the times where I've had that happen, and I have this deep connection and empathy for the disciples, because I sometimes really I'm interested. Okay, I'm interested in what's being taught, and when I'm hearing at church, I'm trying to pray, but there are times I just don't get enough sleep, I haven't had enough coffee, and it hits, right? You've had this happen, we've all had this happen, where the eyes get heavy, and your head like goes back and you get whiplash and it comes straight forward and you think that's gonna wake you up, but it totally doesn't, because all of the brain waves are just like sleep, 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 sleep. And it's really difficult to stay awake. We've had that, right? You've had that happen where you want to be attentive, but you can't. It's like everything is working towards you. The temperature of the room, the way in which people are talking, or the tone that they're using, it's just all stacked up not in your favor. And when we fall asleep sometimes, the real fear, I think, is we miss something, right? You fall asleep in class and then your teacher, your professor calls on you because they know. And now what kind of answer are you going to give? You fall asleep in church and the back of your head hits the pew and makes that loud noise, and everybody looks at you, you're like, I'm not sleeping. I wasn't asleep. It's fine. Father, your homily is great. It's fantastic. We're afraid that if we fall asleep, and the reason this gives us anxiety is because we might miss something. We might come in the middle of something. We might be caught off guard. And we're afraid of that when we fall asleep, but sometimes we're kind of sleeping through life too. I think there are moments where we are oblivious to the way a relationship is shifting. And suddenly we have a conversation with that person and we realize that, wow, things have really changed in this relationship and I had no idea. Or sometimes there are people in our life who are just silent blessings and we don't realize that we're sleeping on it. And then one day when those people aren't around anymore, we realize what an impact they had on us. In the gospel today, we experience the transfiguration. And like I said, Peter, James, and John, they go with Jesus up this mountain to pray and they all fall asleep. And when they wake up, Jesus is having a conversation with Moses and Elijah. And there's a really cool scriptural thing happening here, because Moses and Elijah represent the Old Testament in two ways. They represent the law, the Torah, which is Moses, and they represent the prophetic tradition, which is Elijah. And the other cool part about these two figures is they're conversing with Jesus, but in the Old Testament, it's really ambiguous that either one died. So Moses, in the book of Deuteronomy, it says he dies before he enters the promised land. But then it's quick to note that no one knows where he's buried, that the Lord himself buried Moses. So the Lord took care of Moses' body. That was the funeral. And Elijah's taken up in a chariot of fire, and he just is gone. And so you have these two people that really don't have an ending. They have like a to be continued in the Old Testament, conversing with Jesus. And this represents the fullness and the unity of God's work and salvation. And Jesus is having a conversation with them. Now, Peter, James, and John wake up, and this is like the fell asleep in the middle of something important moment. And they're like, oh my, Jesus looks different. He's been transfigured. There's Moses and Elijah, who Peter sort of innately knows who these people are. Maybe he overhears them talking and they're using names. I don't know. And Peter's still drowsy. So he's like, yeah, what if we made tents for you? And at its most pious, this is, let's make permanent dwellings. Like we made the tent for the place of meeting in the Old Testament where Moses used to meet with God. Let's make something here for this holy moment. And it might just be that he's exhausted. He's like, why don't you all just lay down for a little bit? We'll figure this out when we've all had a good afternoon nap. No sooner does he speak, but God speaks and identifies Jesus as the beloved Son. And then it's all gone. And Jesus is there, just normal. The disciples say nothing. They're silent, and they don't speak of this to anybody. Maybe it's just so much like a dream. They were so drowsy, they wonder if it ever even happened. Are you sleeping through life right now? Are you sleeping through the good things that God is doing? We sometimes want these big moments, these transfiguration moments to happen. Like we would know then, right? But I think a reflection for us this Lent is to ask where God is revealing himself to us, where God is revealing the fullness and unity of the story he's been weaving in our lives, and where we're just not paying attention. It doesn't have to be you're drowsy from sleep. It could be you're just too tied in to your phone. You're too tied into situations that really don't matter. You're concerned about things you don't have any control over, and you spend time worrying about them. And you're so focused over here that the thing that God is doing, you're just not aware of it. Lent shakes us out of those things. At least it provides an opportunity to, right? But we have to make the decision to be awake, to be aware, to draw back from our drowsiness and to look at what God is doing and the way that Jesus is revealing himself in our lives. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. One is to cultivate stillness and calm, to form a lifestyle and a rhythm where we have moments that we're just disconnected and we just are. That helps us to be aware of God's movements in our heart and in our lives, and to become aware of the areas we're offering resistance to God through sin. And the second is to cultivate a routine of prayer. That's one of our pillars for Lent, but have you done it yet? Have you set aside time to pray? Because it's in taking time to pray that we're able to hear the voice of the beloved Son, that we're able to become aware of the ways that God is working in our lives. And the third thing is to practice gratitude. Every day I have a gratitude journal. I write down 2 things I'm thankful for. Some days it's really easy, some days it's really hard. But those blessings I recognize are things that come from God. They're ways that God is revealing his love for me in my life. And when I sit down and think about them every single day, I've found in doing that for over a year that it actually has become easier to identify things to be grateful for, and I catch them in the moment. Those are the transfiguration moments of God's goodness. Those are 3 things you can do, simple things that will help you not be caught sleeping. Because ultimately, we don't want to sleep through the big moments of life. We don't want to sleep through what God is doing in our life. We want to be awake and aware so that when we come down from the mountain, we're not silent and wondering if what happened really happened, but we know what happened and we can share it with others for their goodness and ultimately their salvation. That's the second Sunday of Lent. We're getting into the season. Remember to drop what you're fasting from in the comments below. I'll respond to a few of those things. I'll let you know what I'm fasting from as well. Enjoy this week, and I'll see you back here next Sunday on Summit.